CBSE Board, Class 11, History, Chapter 4, Part 24. Audio by Renee Matthew. The modern history of China aimed at revolving around these main points, three main questions, that is, how to regain sovereignty, to end the humiliation from foreign occupation, and also to bring about equality, which will lead to development. So Chinese debates were marked by the view of three groups. We had three groups which focused on all these problems. The early reformers such as Kang Yuwei, this is Kang Yuwei, or he's also called as, this person is called as Lang Quichio, two different people. These two reformers used traditional ideas in new and different ways. So they started pondering over these three problems, and they used the traditional ideas itself in a new way, in a more innovative way, to meet the challenges posed by the West. So these two reformers started thinking over these problems, and then what happened? They used the traditional ideas to bring about a new, innovative and different method of meeting the problems. Second, so that was the first group, the reformers. The second group, the Republican revolutionaries such as Sun Yat-sen. He was the first president of the Republic, got inspired by ideas from Japan and the West. So he started understanding that Japanese cannot be just relegated. Of course, they have got some skill. So he started getting influenced by the Japanese and the West. And such Republican revolutionaries such as Sun Yat-sen, they got inspired by these ideas. The third group was the Communist Party of China. They wanted to end all these old traditional methods and inequalities and drive out the foreigners. So when these three groups came together, the reformers, as I told you, where they used the traditional old ideas in new and different ways, there was a big change. Then the next group was the Republican revolutionaries. Third was the Communist Party of China, each with their example. So I've given a map of the Qing dynasty. We already talked about it. Very important dynasty and very important part in the history of China. The beginning of modern China can be traced to its first encounter with the West. So the beginnings of modern China can be seen when they encountered with the West, especially in the 16th and 17th centuries. Modern China was given, it took form when the Westerners got in touch with Chinese in the 16th and 17th centuries, and that is when the Jesuit missionaries introduced Western sciences such as astronomy and mathematics. So that is the time when these missionaries started introducing Western science and they got influenced by astronomy and mathematics. So that was the beginning of modern China, and that was the first encounter with the West, especially in the 16th and 17th centuries when the Jesuit missionaries introduced these sciences. So there was a kind of combination with the science also. So of course the impact was limited, but the impact was immediate. That is very important. Immediate impact, though it was limited, it set in motion events that gathered momentum. It started gaining some kind of momentum in the 19th century when there was a combination with the sciences. And that is when Britain used force to expand its lucrative trade in opium. Britain wanted to expand its trade in opium that led to the First Opium War. And this undermined the ruling Qing dynasty and strengthened demands for reform and change. So because of the trade in opium, again they had a small problem where the Qing dynasty was afterwards strengthened. Because of the opium war with China, they also fell apart. Okay, so they wanted to create an impact. They were going towards the modern ideas which they wanted to implement with all these three notions and three ideas. But what happened? They also mixed some of the ideas that they got from astronomy and mathematics, but immediately there was an impact. But it's only because of Britishers who used force to expand their trade in opium, and that is something which undermined the Qing dynasty. And of course, they had to go for reform and change after that. The opium trade. Very important point. The demand for Chinese goods such as tea, silk and porcelain created a serious balance of trade problem. Okay, everybody was in demand of these products, and even now we have got this craze for these products. It is exclusively different from the other products produced in other parts of the world. Western goods did not find a market in China. Chinese did not want to encourage the Western market, so payment had to be in silver. Okay, it was of a kind of second grade. The East India Company found a new option. So what did the East India Company do? That is from India. They had trade with India, you know about that. So they found a new option, and that was opium. Opium was grown in India. Okay, so they sold this opium in China. They knew that the Chinese did not encourage their Western markets. This point is very important. Did you understand? The Western goods did not find a market in China, so payment was in silver. So the next step from the Britishers is to find a new option that is leading to the growth of opium in India, and they started selling this opium in China, which gave the silver that they earned to company agents in Canton in return for letters of credit. So they started selling this opium in China, which was manufactured in India, and gave the silver that they earned to company agents in Canton. They started giving all this. Still they got only silver. They did not get gold or any other higher grade of credits. They started selling this to some agents in return for letters of credit. The company used the silver to buy tea, silk and porcelain to sell in Britain. So it was a kind of indirect trade which was happening, and it was not something in the straightforward way. So company used all this silver to buy tea, silk and porcelain, and they sold it in Britain. Company bought these things from China and they sold it in Britain. So this was a triangular trade which took place between Britain, India and China. So look at the complication. It was really complex. King reformers such as Kang Youwei and Liang Quichou realized the need to strengthen the system. They understood that the system had got some kind of loopholes, and the reformers also told that we have to strengthen the system, and that is why we have had this problem with opium war and things like that. So they said we have to do two things. One is to strengthen the system. The second is to initiate policies. Why should you initiate policies? Why would you initiate policies? So that you can build a modern administrative system. That is the first point. You can build a new army and an educational system. Okay? Then set up local assemblies to establish constitutional government. Three very important points which will help the Chinese to strengthen the system. First is to build a modern administrative system. Then an army, and also a very firm established educational system. Then is to set up the local assemblies to establish constitutional government. They also saw the need to protect China from colonization. Of course, you had to protect China from colonization also, because they were badly ruined and devastated and shattered under the foreign colonial power. So now they had to do away with that. The negative example of colonized countries worked powerfully on Chinese thinkers. There was a very big negative example which took place of colonized countries worked powerfully. They understood how the colonized people were suffering under the foreigners. So that is how the Chinese thinkers and reformers said we should not make the same mistake as the other colonized people. We should learn from the problems of the other parts of the country. The partition of Poland in the 18th century was a very much discussed example by the Chinese. I told you that they learned from the mistakes of the others, so much so that by the late 1890s it came to be used as a verb to Poland us. Bolanwo, India was another such example. So don't Poland us, don't Indian us. All these were some kind of examples, because it's like you're colonizing us just like how you colonized Poland and India. You shouldn't do that. We shouldn't make the same mistake, was the meaning of these slogans. In 1903, there was a thinker, his name was Liang Qichao, we saw that already. He believed that only by making people aware that China was a nation would be able to resist the West. Only when you understand that, when the people of China understands that we are a nation, that is when they will be able to resist West. They will be able to initiate the people to actually resist the West and understand the meaning of standing together against the foreign powers. So they wrote that India was a country that was totally destroyed by a non-country, that is the East India Company. So they started teaching the people, saying that see how India was destroyed. It was a very strong country of deep cultural heritage and roots, but it was completely destroyed. So we should not have such a fate. That was the kind of motivation that the reformers and thinkers gave to their people. And this thinker criticized Indians for being cruel to their own people and subservient to the British. We know that many people in India itself, they supported the Britishers. They started dominating their own fellow men, and they supported the Britishers to set up their systems. That is how the Britishers were able to successfully rule for almost 200 years. So this thinker, Liang Qichao, is blaming the Indians who supported the Britishers, where the others, that is their fellow men, were subservient. They had to completely surrender to the Britishers. So he blamed those Indians. Now these kind of arguments carried a powerful appeal. It was so powerful, as ordinary Chinese could see, that the British used Indian soldiers in their wars on China. So when they had a war with China, they used the Indian soldiers to fight with them. So that was a kind of indirect war which was happening. So Britishers initiated that. Above all, many felt that traditional ways of thinking had to be changed. So many people understood that we could no longer depend on the traditional methods. This is something which happens even now. I have seen many schools and even educational institutions still following the traditional method of teaching. It is not that it is bad. We can always say that this is something which gave us education over the years. But the demand of the present world is different. Even before the strike of the pandemic, there was a necessity to change the way we taught, right? To change the way we taught and thought, both. So these kind of things were changed in China at a very early stage. Now we need to talk about Confucianism, which was developed from the teachings of a very famous philosopher, Confucius. You must have heard of him. This is Confucius. He is a person who has impacted. His impact was felt. It was felt over the branches of psychology, literature, sociology. Very great philosopher. And his disciples were concerned about these things. One is good conduct, practical wisdom, and proper social relationship. He kind of reiterated on these 3 points: good conduct, practical wisdom, and proper social relationships. It influenced the Chinese attitude toward life. Okay, so his teachings changed the attitude of the Chinese people towards life. It provided social standards. People had a high standard of living, and it also laid the basis for political theories. When your attitude to life changes, when your social standard gets better, of course, it will lead to new political pragmatic theories and institutions. And this was seen as a major barrier to new ideas and institutions. That is how better ideas, reformation, and institutions sprang up. So this is a very important point. To train people in modern subjects, students were sent to study. So people had to get exposure. For this reason, students were sent abroad. Even before they were sent abroad, we saw that professors and people from other universities in abroad came and taught in Japan. So the students from Japan were asked to go and study from China were asked to go and study in Japan, Britain, and France. This was done in Japan earlier, but now China also said we need to send our students and everybody to study in these places to bring back new ideas. So many Chinese students traveled to Japan in the 1890s to get an exposure. This not only brought back new ideas, but also this gave birth to many leading Republicans. They got an idea, and many leading Republicans came into being in these places. So that is something important. They just asked them to get new ideas, but what did they bring? New Republicans or leading people.